Greetings and welcome, everyone. My name is Jud Hendrix with Interfaith Paths to Peace, and I'm excited to welcome you to the most exciting hour of my day. This is our chance to talk with Louisville Evolutionaries, people that are helping Louisville evolve into a more compassionate, awake, engaged city. And I'm really excited for our conversation today with Doug Van Houten. Doug is a old friend, not in his age, although we are getting older, but I've known Doug for a long time. And just been so thankful for the work that he's bringing to Louisville, and we'll have a chance to talk about all of that. And I also want to welcome all those that have joined us on Zoom. We'll have a chance for you to ask some questions and engage in the conversation as we continue. But Doug, thank you. Thanks for being a Louisville Evolutionary. And you're not only a Louisville Evolutionary, you're like a national evolutionary. You're doing so much great work around the country and around the world with the work that you're doing. So thanks for being a global evolutionary. Doug, start us off with some introduction. Give us a little bit of kind of a time frame of your life so we can have some time to a scaffolding to put some things on. So welcome, Doug. Thanks for being you, and thanks for being on the Louisville Evolutionary Lunch Hour.
Well, thank you, Jud. I so appreciate being here and appreciate your work and appreciate your support all of these years for my work. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So yeah, my life, born and raised in Louisville, moved around the Northeast a lot. My father worked in sales. So lots of moving around and learning how to make friends quickly. But it was also traumatic. It was very challenging, you know, leaving at really important moments in my life, like in high school and having to move to a new area. But I've been back in Louisville since I was about 17. And, you know, I've just been on this amazing journey, it feels like, in life. It's been wild and incredible. And I want to just put a plug in for my mother, who got her master's at 50 years old in social work. She was also the black sheep in her family, so I come by that honestly. And she grew up sitting at a table with her father, who was an editor for the Louisville papers. He worked for the Binghams his whole life. And so she sat at a table where she learned a lot of, like, really liberal, open-minded ideas. And so she really set me on a trajectory of being very open and seeing the world differently than, you know, our culture offers and that kind of thing. So, and again, through her, you know, the trajectory of my life has been, you know, one of a lot of questions of, like, what does wholeness look like? What's possible for humans beyond, like, this horror unfolding around us, right, on this planet? You know, asking deeper questions. And again, I just attribute a big chunk of that to her. And so that's really been my life. It's been a spiritual adventure is what I call it. And, you know, ever opening up to all kinds of conversations with different organizations. And now with this main tear with Animas Valley Institute, which I know we're going to get into, which talks about my main work in life right now.
Yeah. Well, let's jump in. I do want to get and focus on the work that you're doing right now, because I think it's really amazing and important work. But before we do that, we do a Louisville conversation card. So I'm going to begin our interview with inviting you to choose a card from our Louisville conversation cards. There's 3 levels, so you'll have to choose a level, 1, 2, or 3, and then choose a card between 1 and 10. And that will be the card that starts us off. So what level, 1, 2, or 3?
Oh, I like intimacy and intensity. Let's go with 3.
Beautiful, Doug. I was hoping you would say so. And then how about a card from 1 to 10?
You know, I like the number 8 today.
8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Well, this is your card. What powerful experience changed the direction of your life? What powerful experience or experiences changed the direction of your life? That's a great card to start with. I couldn't have chosen a better one.
Wow, so many. But the first one that rises to the surface is discovering the work of Matthew Fox. And he had started a college out in California, Creation Spirituality. And in that program, he had all of these great teachers, you know, that we all know. Joanna Macy taught there, and Brian Swim, and Thomas, you know, on and on and on. But anyways, that opened up a whole new world for me at like 28 or 29 years old, blew open my heart. It was a major opening for me on many levels. But I came across a poem that by Thich Nhat Hanh, because of this, being introduced to this work. And it was that poem, Please Call Me by My True Names. And that devastated me, reading that please call me by my true name so that I can wake up. And that seems to fit a central theme in my life. You know, who am I? And what is my life about beyond the social and psychic limitations of culture? And again, that's been my tear. That's been the vein that I've been on all these years. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And that work has been so influential with so many of us, I think, that are doing this work now, even in that interfaith, interspiritual work that Interfaith Paths to Peace is based on. Is so much of that work was done by Matthew Fox and bringing that. I think the ones that you just named have been mentors for bringing a lot of us together in doing this work.
Yes.
And so I'm so thankful that you first kind of fell into that. That's been transformative for a lot of us and introducing us to that. Talk some, one of the questions we're asking comes from some work by James Hillman. And he wrote a book called The Soul's Code, and he talks about how often these really difficult or hard experiences became the events that really shaped who our soul became. And even though we may not want them for ourselves or for other people, they really were these transformative pieces. Can you name some of maybe the more difficult experiences that maybe you wouldn't have wanted, but you also see how they deeply shaped your soul and the work that you're doing right now?
Oh yeah, sure. I think wow, the thing that rises for me is sort of just this general malaise of how there has not been elders and healthy adults in my life, my family, my community, our country, our world, really. I mean, they're there, but hard to find. They're not honored, right? But not having that and not having like a strong father in my life, and the challenges of that, and also the beauty of it, you know. And I got crushed from that. I think so many of us have, right? Men and women across the globe, right? We've gotten crushed by that. And for me, there's an experience I had as a kid. At 8 or 9 years old, I decided to move down into the basement with my brother. I thought it was a great idea. And then my sister split up upstairs and took both of the bedrooms. And I thought that was a great idea. But my brother didn't come home until after my bed curfew or bedtime. So I'd have to go downstairs into the basement and go to sleep by myself, and back in the unfinished part of the basement. And it was pretty darn traumatizing. And it carries the face of, you could say, this larger kind of wounding that I feel like I've experienced in this culture. It was kind of that in the dark nights, you know, of my youth, not having, you know, this kind of guidance and protection and, you know, all kinds of things. So that was a pretty traumatic experience, which has really catapulted me, though, profoundly in the work that I do. I hold space for people, you could say, that travel into their darkest nights and on their dark journeys and into the darkness of the unknown and the unconscious part of themselves, to gather up the gifts that are there. Something gets forged wherever we get crushed, you know, a sixth sense or a way of being, and it can become a gift, and it can become like even a sacred wound. that become a gift for our people, you know, a way of serving, you could say.
Yeah. So that, and one of the things that story, or your experience there, one of the things I found so compelling and so attractive about you is your ability to name that, and then also invite other people, other men around those places of our sacred wounding, and naming them and being in them is one of the things that brought a lot of us together, to be able to sit with one another in that space.
Right.
And so your early childhood of having to go into the dark basement or something is the work that you lead people in now, right? I mean, that's the
Yeah.
journey. So talk some more about, let's get into the animus stuff, the Bill Plotkin's work, and share some about, what's the work you're doing right now? And maybe even describe a weekend, what those, or a week of the journeys
Okay.
that you lead people on, I think would be really interesting.
I'd love to. I'm so passionate about this work, as you know. I think of myself, I'm a guide to soul, and nature-based, nature being the key word here, nature-based guide to soul, a nature-based guide to self-healing and wholing. So you could say a combination of ecotherapy and depth psychology, and blending those two together with earth wisdom and a lot of soul poetry.
Mm.
And so I invite people into the outer wilderness, but even more importantly, into the inner wilderness of their own psyches. You know, again, with many goals, and big one is to cultivate their natural wholeness that nature endowed them with. Has to be invited, role modeled, cultivated. When we reinstall ourselves in the natural world, watch out, you know. But I'm also guiding people into self-healing work, profound self-healing work that nature, again, is the major catalyst for. And we work with nature-based maps that a fellow named Bill Plotkin, who started Animas Valley, has cultivated. And it's a really stunning map. You know, nature holds all the blueprints for human maturation and healing, you could say. But I also guide, in a bigger sense of guiding this piece to folks to be in conversation with their own deep knowing, you know, with soul. I mean, whatever you want to call that, you know, be in conversation with that. And what is that part asking of us, guiding us to, longing for? You know, what is that? What is that? And so all of our practices, we call them soul craft practices. They're designed to circumnavigate everyday consciousness, to tune into soul, which we feel is the main architect of our lives. So in a sense, we're deconstructing the ego, reconstructing it, rooted in soul, but ultimately in service to spirit or mystery, God, whatever you want to say, right? We're guiding people to be in that main conversation, which is so critical, because that's the conversation where we find where we belong, where we root, what is our destiny, and what is our purpose. I can't think of any more important work right now than helping people to find, what is your purpose? Where do you belong on this earth, especially in this dire situation we find us where the species is at risk. So helping people to discover that and to gather up the wholeness, to embody a vision. Wow, there you go. That's very important.
Yeah, that's huge.
Mhm.
Talk some about these practices that you do to do that kind of soul
Mhm.
craft work. I think the practices really speak to the work, and they've been cultivated so well by this wisdom tradition that you're carrying on and working with. Share some of those practices that you do with soul craft.
Absolutely. My favorite is what we call soul-centric dream work. So we work with people with their dreams. And the deep premise here is that soul speaks to the ego mainly in images and emotions and several, metaphor, etc. And so each night you're blessed with several nocturnal visions, letters from God, as I say, as I've heard others say too, and we help people to be in conversation with those on the land. It's profound work. Here you've gotten, again, this invitation from mystery, from God, here to go wander on the land where so many people find renewal, right? Where the ego can't protect itself, right? And to work with those dreams in that way. And they come back and tell the tale. And then we give them, reflection, mirroring, and more invitations around that. We also do different programs. We offer a variety of programs, 15 or 20 of different kinds, and about 50 to 70 a year. And in those programs, we offer generic invitations to go wandering on the land with. And that stirs up stuff for people beautifully, come back, tell the tale, and that we help them build on that. So we're coming at it from many angles, deep imagery. We do counsel with folks. We do ceremony with folks. And all of this is designed to invite people into this deeper conversation that, we need to sometimes create space for in our lives. It's hard to listen to soul sometimes when we're busy in our everyday lives. So that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg. There's so many other things we offer. It's a huge toolbox that's really quite stunning, actually.
And go ahead and share, if people are interested in more of that work, where they would find those resources and how to connect to that. And yeah, so share some of that information now, where people can hear more about that, or how about if you would recommend a book or a resource that would be really a good introduction to that.
Totally, yeah. I think Bill Plotkin's book called Soulcraft, Crossing into the Mysteries of Nature and Psyche, is a great book that really describes the heart of what we're doing here. He's got 4 books out now, or 3. His next one's about ready to come out. And
I happen to have here my copy of Nature and the Human Soul. So it's right on my bookshelf behind me. So that was was that his first one?
It actually was, but the publisher said, it's too dense. Don't make this your first book. Do something else.
Yeah.
And so he did Soulcraft. But that's really his life's work right there.
Yeah.
That soul-centric developmental wheel, where he paints a portrait of how nature intended, how he understands it, how nature intended us to grow psychospiritually through 8 stages of a life, and what are the tasks that need to happen for that to be completed, and so that you can move to the next stage, that kind of thing. Yeah. But let me also share, there's the Animas Valley Institute website, which is www.animas.org. And you can get on there and read a lot of information about what we do, see some of our programs and that kind of stuff. You go to my website too, www.bodyartsoul.org.
Great.
Read some more.
Yeah, I would encourage people to do that if you have interest, because these resources, I think, are just transformational, especially coming out of this cosmology. One of the things that I've found so helpful about this work is it allows people that may be coming out of a traditional or historic religious cosmology to have practices and deep resources for their own spiritual growth, if you no longer kind of hold to that kind of supernatural theism, so to speak, idea of God, that and that cosmology where humans are just another expression of nature, not something that got dropped down from somewhere else, and so that the soul-centric and nature-centric path feels like is the real rich, because I think a lot of people are moving into that kind of a cosmology, and the work that you're doing allows them to engage in those practices that may be different, but I think very relevant to their journey at this point. Talk about one of the things we used to do in group a lot was do poetry and listen to
Mm.
poetry, do Lectio Divina with poetry or sit with poetry. And I know you've been writing some of your own poems. Would you be willing to share one, or just maybe what poetry means to you, and then share one of the poems you've written?
Well, you must have misread that because I haven't been writing any poetry. I wish I had,
Oh, I thought you had
but
been
yeah,
writing.
yeah. No, I do some artwork, a lot of artwork on my own. That's poetic for me, but I do have some poems I could read that really speak to the heart of this work.
Yeah,
If you want me to read one of those.
let's read one. Let's do a little practice.
Okay. Here's one by David White, who I would say is one of the great Western soul poets. There's so many, Mary Oliver, Rilke, etc. But this one is called What to Remember When Waking. In that first hardly noticed moment in which you wake, coming back to this life from the other, more secret, movable, and frighteningly honest world where everything began, there is a small opening into the new day which closes the moment you begin your plans. What you can plan is too small for you to live. What you can live wholeheartedly will make plans enough for the vitality hidden in your sleep, the unconscious. To be human is to become visible while carrying what is hidden as a gift to others. To remember the other world in this world is to live in your true inheritance. You are not a troubled guest on this earth. You are not an accident amidst other accidents. You were invited from another and greater night than the one from which you have just emerged. Now, looking through the slanting light of the morning window toward the mountain presence of everything that can be, what urgency calls you to your one love? What shape waits in the seed of you to grow and spread its branches against a future sky? Is it waiting in the fertile sea, in the trees beyond the house, in the life you can imagine for yourself, in the open and lovely white page waiting on the desk? And so this poem on surface sounds like what to remember when you wake up from your dream, and absolutely. But I think there's even a deeper invitation here is, what does it mean to wake up spiritually downward to soul? I think this path has been obscured and omitted. There's an emphasis on the upper, which is absolutely needed. But this other path into embodiment here on earth, and that is a spiritual journey, psycho-spiritual journey that Jung, I think, has started this conversation again. And he brought that back in, that the universe is ensouled. Everything has its own beauty, its own private song, as Mary Oliver says, its own unique way of belonging and being. And David White's, talking about this here. And one more thing, where do you find this? He says, is it waiting in the fertile sea, in the trees beyond the house, in the life you can imagine for yourself, or in the open and lovely white page on the desk? So he's telling us in nature twice, like Buddha and Jesus going out into the secret laboratories of the wild for instruction and renewal. And he also says for him, he's a poet and a writer. And at the very end, this is how I want to hear this. In the open and lovely white page on the waiting desk, well, that's where he finds his muse. He's a writer, he's a poet. So there's where we can find these guides to soul, these deeper conversations, right? That want to have their way with us. And this is how you can wake up to this downward journey to earth.
Yeah. I think that is so important because we do see so many transcendent practices right now, which, as you said, are really important, but that's a different, we often talk about, upper world practice, middle world practice, and lower
Mhm.
world practice. And I think it's the lower world practice that really is in deep need, especially in the second half of life.
Mhm.
I think, and that's what Carl Jung always was inviting people to do in the second half of life, is to do the underworld work, that
Mhm.
deeper, darker work into where the soul speaks. And I think one of the things you are offering, I think, to our world is an elder. And you were talking about not having those elders, but I think there is this tribe of elders that are beginning to do this work and then begin to offer it. And you're really leading the way, I think, in our group, to offer that good soul work, that deeper work to the world. And a lot of that has come out of these communities of practice. Can you talk some about, so I know you do a lot of this individual work, but it also is always kind of brought back into the community for processing and journeying with communities of practice. Can you talk about how this work unfolds in communities and the ways in which you all debrief that individual work back into community?
You mean like what are some of the offerings I do locally? I'm not sure. I'm not quite
Yeah,
on your.
both. What are the practices? I know, like when you all do the individual journeys out into nature, that you
Mm.
you come back into what you call circle, or I'm not the groups that you do to help process that, and describe what some of those are,
Yeah.
and maybe what some of those groups that have been for you personally.
Well, and this might be part of that. We at our programs, we do 11-day, 5-day programs, so people have these experiences, and it's great. But what do you do with it? How do you bring it alive? So we do a whole reincorporation piece on the last full day or last 2 days, and talk of the importance, and like give skills and really practical things to do, like develop practices or projects and one-step actions, etc. Continuing ceremonies. We also highly recommend that people get mentoring. In a way, when you open up to soul, these deep conversation, it's like opening up Pandora's box, and a whole lot of trouble can come up from this. So we do ongoing mentoring with folks, and like how, again, mainly about like how do you live this into the world? What do you do to continue this conversation and actually take the steps, the actions, develop the skills, the wholeness. That's why we do the self-healing and holing work with people, so they can actually live soul into the world, because soul will challenge you to the core, if you say yes to soul. So that's partly what we do, I'm offering practices and programs here locally, and Marilyn, who's here, and I have done several, probably 10 or 15 programs over the years that are definitely very soul and healing and holing oriented, Joanna Macy work oriented. So that's just some of what I do. I guide people out here on the farm, but maybe you want to fine tune that question now that
Yeah,
I've said
well,
that.
yeah, and I hope. What are some of those things? If ways, yeah, what are you offering, and what are ways that people can engage that?
Well, the individual mentoring I do, people come out here to the farm for an hour. I do it on Skype and Zoom with people all over the planet, but I do it here on the farm, one-on-one, for an hour, 3 hours, 5 hours. Some people come and stay the night, and so I work with them all day with what's up for them for several days sometimes. So that's part of it.
Yeah,
And I do dream work with people and that kind of thing. Joe Mitchell has had me come and guide programs there for his classes. Last year, all 7 of his classes, I did an hour and a half long for like 175 people, I think. And it was to invite them out onto the land and be in a psycho-spiritual relationship to the land, and be vulnerable, go with an open heart and a supple body, right? As a
yeah.
pilgrim. Yeah.
Well, and talk about that connection, because we hosted a webinar, I guess, or a conversation on Zoom last week around planetary consciousness and the new need for a new relationship and a harmonious relationship with the planet. And if we can cultivate that, Talk about some of the ramifications of that nature-based work as far as its relationship to environmental justice, environmental sustainability, and right relationship with the planet, and how that the moral implications of that work for sustainability issues.
Right. Yeah. Well, back to this piece about like nature, we've been endowed with by nature innate capacities for wholeness. And if they don't get cultivated, there's a pathology that sets in and we wander off and get in trouble, right? Our great creativity capacities are not rooted in instinct and earth. And so we create a lot of trouble. We destroy the planet we're living on. In a way, we've stalled out in a kind of adolescence. And so the moral imperative is for us to cultivate practices, ways of being that fully flesh out what human wholeness looks like, so that we can be more integrous members to this earth that we live on, right? And you can only have healthy cultures if you have healthy individuals. You can only have healthy individuals if you have healthy cultures. So it's imperative that we fully flesh out and fathom what it is to be a human, a full and whole human, so that we can be in ecological rightness with the place we live in and are embedded in. But I also want to offer too that rites of passages are extremely important. How do we help people to mature psychospiritually one stage at a time, so that we can again be full members? This is our journey right now. This is what's happening on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
We're being forced to, we can voluntarily go there. Some of us are, I think, but collectively we're being forced to reckon with this. And we're in a dire place right now. Yeah. And
So
I wonder if even we're going to even make it. I hate to say that. I have a question mark about that.
Well, right. And I think some of the wisdom coming out of this work is that, that humans are a blip, right? We're 3 seconds on the evolutionary scale so whether or not humans in our current form or our current psyche, whether or not we continue, I think is a question mark. Nature is going to, the beauty about nature, well, and those things aren't separate. I think that's what we're saying, but it will be interesting. Either we're going to have a right relationship with the planet, or we won't exist, at least in this form of being human. And maybe the next form, I think that's what they're saying, is maybe the next form of human after Homo sapien would be those that are able to develop a harmonious relationship with nature, whatever that looks like. And then they'll look back and they'll say, well, the transition was that transition. Those that lived are the ones that ended up having a right relationship with nature, because that is our real challenge right now. And I think this practice, or this cosmology and all of this wisdom that's emerging is for this time. It's specifically for this time. So these practices, this work that you're doing, as you say, is exactly the work that has to happen on our planet and in our community. I want to open it up. We've got several people on the Zoom call, which is really exciting. If you have a comment or a question, join in on the conversation. You can unmute yourself. And anybody want to ask a question or make a comment? Well, if you do, feel free to jump in.
Yes,
I go ahead. Hey, Marilyn. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. Yes, it's wonderful to be with all of you today. I'm really blown away by technology. It's not something that it's been one of my favorite things in my life, and I come to it very, very late in life. But I'm just blown away with how we can get together in this way. You were talking about Homo sapiens, and I've seen the words Homo imagines used, and I kind of like that. Einstein once said, the imagination is more important than knowledge. My son, when he got his first little old Volkswagen in high school, found this bumper sticker. And he thought that was just a wonderful idea, that knowledge was not that important. It's our imagination. But, you know, and he was coming at it from a high schooler's point of view and was kind of fed up with some of his courses and that sort of thing. But I really think there's a deep wisdom in that. And it may be that, or homo naturalist, I would like to think, you know, sort of play with those words. So that's one thing. But I also did want to ask Doug and a question, and he's been dealing with this to some extent, but and it may be a rather difficult, well, certainly most questions. This question has to do with how, Doug, has your own soul work changed given that we are now living in a pandemic? And I know that, you know, we go from being together in groups and in the wild to technology, but it's more, I'm sort of more interested in your sort of musing on your personal soul work and how has that changed. And the reason I think this is in some ways a kind of a crazy question, but could be a fertile question. It's crazy in the sense that we're all in the midst of being in shock, essentially. I feel in shock. So being able to sort of figure this out is not an easy thing when you're right in the middle of it. But just the same, I'd like to ask the question.
Yeah, I can jump right in there, Jud. It's a beautiful question. I really appreciate that. Yeah, and I'll try and answer it. But so what's alive for me right now is I'm really listening to my dream life. And lots of these really potent dreams are coming. And my sense is, was just musing on this yesterday, that an initiation for me, you know, collectively certainly, and maybe I just speak about it both, there's an individual and a collective initiation, I think, into a greater consciousness. You know, and like how to be in relationship with the whole. I mean, this has been our journey, but now it's been heightened. And so I've been having these incredible dreams for the last 6 months. And one in particular of a black winged one who took me on flight out. It was a very short dream. Took me into flight out, and I'm watching the world, and I swoop down. I see the Amazon forest on fire, and I get really close up. But then Dreammaker, this being who takes me out for a larger view, and I see the moon, who's one of my muses, and I see the sun, and then I see the solar system, and then even beyond. And so this has really set me on fire of like this larger view of what does it mean to be in this cosmic liturgy, and how to hold that view, I think, in this great unraveling that we're going through, you know, which certainly has been heightened by COVID-19. And so I've like been studying the work of Brian Swim again, who talks about the larger arc is creative, but there's destruction embedded in this, you know. And so it's like I'm anchoring my body, my heart, in my being into a larger perspective. Again, it's been again invited from Dreammaker, my own deep knowing, and in conversation with the unseen world, with my own soul, leaning even more deeply into that huge well of and resource of knowing and wisdom, you know, and then being in ceremony, you know, with these feathers, this flight. And it connected me to an earlier dream I had of a tree in the desert with these black feathers. And so now this, some people might think this is pretty wild, but I'm hanging black feathers in the tree here in this yard, being in conversation again with this dream that I had recently, and with this dream that came to me 13 years ago that I didn't feel like I was really ready to explore, but now I am. So it's like this opening up this conversation for me, this other way to be with this world that's falling apart. So every day, not every day, but I get these feathers out and I contemplate, what does this feather mean? Why did Dreammaker give this to me? And I adorn it with these jewels that I have, rocks and stones and whatnot. And then I go out and I hang it in the tree. And I have these conversations with soul and mystery, and just letting it work me and open up a deeper, more mysterious conversation that my own thinking mind has available, right? So tapping into a greater knowing in a way. So that's kind of the highlight of it.
You've just written a poem. It's beautiful by describing that dream.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm thinking homo dreaming.
All right. We are Homo Imaginings. That's from Janine Marie Haig and Bill Plotkin's partner.
Oh, is that?
All
okay.
Homo Imaginings.
Yeah,
and
well, that's
all
what
of her work is about the imagination.
Yeah.
And the wisdom in the deep imagination that is there waiting for us, this evolutionary leap of consciousness into our deep imagination. Yeah.
She has that wonderful poem about on returning. I don't know what the name is. I think it's called On Returning. It's like, so now that you've gone away, you've been on this journey and you've come back. What do you do with that? How do you carry that? And I can't do it justice, but you're sort of, with sort of, do you have it there? Oh, read it, please.
I was thinking about reading it.
It is so wonderful. Yes.
It must happen. Please read it.
Yes. Okay. It's called The Return. It's stunning, really. Someday, if you are lucky, you'll return from a thunderous journey, trailing snake scales, wing fragments, and the musk of earth and moon. Eyes will examine you for signs of damage or change, and you too will wonder if your skin shows traces of fur or leaves, if thrushes have built a nest of your hair, if Andromeda burns from your eyes. Do not be surprised by prickly questions from those who barely inhabit their own fleeting lives, who barely taste their own possibility, who barely dream. If your hands are empty, treasureless, if your toes have not grown claws, if your obedient voice has not become a wild cry, a howl, you will reassure them. We warned you, they might declare. There is nothing else, no point, no meaning, no mystery at all, just this frantic waiting to die. And yet, they tremble mute, afraid you returned without sweet elixir for unspeakable thirst, without a fluent dance or holy language to teach them, without a compass bearing to a forgotten border where no one crosses without weeping for the terrible beauty of galaxies in granite and bone. They tremble, hoping your lips hold a secret, that the song your body now sings will redeem them. Yet they fear your secret is dangerous, shattering. And once it flies from your astonished mouth, they, like you, must disintegrate before unfolding tremulous wings. The Return. We often read that after when we guide vision fasts. We take people on we do 11-day ceremony of a deep dive to soul. And this is one of them that we read at the end. So they don't forget the terrible beauty of granite and bones and moon, etc.
And who, the author of that again?
Yeah, it's Janine Marie Hagen.
Mm-hmm.
And she's a guide and a writer for Animas Valley Institute. She's also Bill Plotkin's partner in crime, in life, in many ways.
Wow, what a dynamo there, huh?
Oh, yeah. They guide a lot of programs together.
Yeah. Are there other comments or reflections? Thanks so much for that, Marilyn. Are there other folks that would like to join in on the conversation? Yeah, Terry.
I'll name two things, and Doug, you can just answer one. One of them feels like it's gonna be too big of a question for this toward the end of this conversation. One is that I am going to attend a presentation soon by Brian Swim about trauma and how it affects the larger community. And so I'm curious too how the earth is holding with your relationship. That I know that none of us would dare speak for nature and the earth, but just your sense of how the earth would take care of itself. My guess is that we may kill ourselves off, but we won't the earth, that it has its own life and will protect itself, but I may be wrong around that. But sure, I know that's a big conversation. The second was just a little curious about your weekend retreats or week-long experiences are on my bucket list, but what it might look like to do something via Zoom.
Oh yeah.
Having like a 1, 2, or 3 hour thing, which I wouldn't have guessed. So what that might look like.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I can answer both of those. Yeah. I think of, your first piece about the earth, that, the earth story will continue for sure. The human story, we don't know. It's a question mark right now. And I feel like we're on a planetary vision quest collectively. And, to come home, right, to this larger perspective in this way of belonging, more fully here. And some initiates don't make it, and I again, I have a question mark, but I think the earth story will continue. I hope, everything I do is assuming we will make it, and praying that is, the intention here. But again, it's up to mystery. We pray and try and help people to show up. It's like, I think what all of us on this call are involved in. It's like, how can we show up more magnificently, more courageously, and offer possibilities, and become, folks who are inspiring for other people, I think, to say yes to soul and these deeper conversations, I could probably go on forever about that, but let me answer your other question, is that at Animas, most of our programs are in person, and of course COVID-19 has put the kibosh on that, and so now we're designing online programs right now as we speak, and we're going to come out with a whole variety of them. And here's the beauty too, is that we were endowed recently from a very wealthy person, for 3 years in a row, has given this huge chunk of money to us. And so now we are offering that money even in a bigger way. Last year we did hugely. And then this year, in even a more bigger way, we're offering that money, scholarships to folks who can't make it, because our programs are not cheap. They're expensive, and what we charge barely pays for the cost of them, we've been depending on scholarships. So get online and check out some of that's going to be coming out soon. That could be a possibility. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, great resources. I want to begin to close down, although the comments and questions are really good. If anybody else wants to jump in. So Doug, I want to begin to close by giving you thanks for just the authenticity and the beauty of your journey that is paying off for all of us. And your faith, I mean, I've watched you struggle with all these things that seem so like pretty edgy. I mean, we run with a kind of an edgy crowd anyway, but I was always thinking Doug is really out there. Like he's doing it. He is in it. And the beauty, I mean, that's what Carl Jung said, unless you're becoming more eccentric in the second half of your life, you're not growing, and so I don't want to call the work you're doing eccentric, but I do want to read, maybe it's a little eccentric. I do want to read the stage 6, some of the characteristics of that, if you're doing your work in Bill Plotkin's and it describes so beautifully you and the work you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
It's called Late Adulthood. The stage is confirms mastery of a delivery system for embodying soul powers. Creating and implementing innovative delivery systems, the cultural component for the soul. And the stage archetype is the artisan. And the gift to the community is seeds of cultural renaissance. So Doug, thank you. The seeds you are providing really are seeds of our cultural renaissance, our evolution as a people. And so I know that work has come at great expense for you, and a lot of vulnerability and not knowing, where the next turn was going to lead, but you've been so faithful in doing that. So a deep bow to you in this work, and any ways in which we can continue to promote it and put it out there, because it's the good work. So I don't want to close with my final words, but what would you want to say or challenge us as a Louisville community to in these times? What are some final challenging words for us?
Yeah, well, thank you for what you said. For me, I think it's to do inner work, to courageously give yourself to inner work. Because they asked Jung decades ago, he said, people asked him, he said, this is one of the biggest questions he ever got. Will we make it in the decades ahead? And Jung said, if enough people do their inner work. And I think that fits in with Thomas Berry too. If enough people do that inner work, go on a psycho-spiritual journey, like Janine poem is asking us for courageously to give ourselves to this journey, this heroine's journey, that we might have Thomas Berry speaks that we might have a dream of the earth together. We might collectively dream our way, deep imagine, letting the earth guide us. But I think it's going to take enough people who are willing to go on that mysterious journey, of listening to and answering the dangerous and alluring summons coming from the human soul now, from the dream of the earth, and from living in an ensouled universe. And it's people that if they could spend enough of their time doing that, courageously jumping in, I think that would be part of it.
Yeah, I agree. And any final words from anybody online?
I have a poem I can end with too, if you want. So.
That would be perfect. I was wondering about. I pulled up as you were talking. Thich Nhat Hanh's "Call Me by My True Names," but go ahead and read a closing poem for him. I think that would be for us. Okay. I think that would be perfect.
Yeah, this one's called Cargo, and it's by a fellow named Greg Kimura, Kimura, Greg Kimura. It's called Cargo, for anybody who's interested. I read this all the time. Like I get these poems that I read at my programs. This is one that's been really read a lot recently. You enter life a ship laden with meaning, purpose, and gifts, sent to be delivered to a hungry world. And as much as the world needs your cargo, you need to give it away. Everything depends on this. But the world forgets its needs, and you forget your mission, and the ancestral maps used to guide you have become faded scrawls on the parchment of dead pharaohs. The cargo weighs you heavy the longer it is held, and spoilage becomes a risk. The ship sputters from port to port, and at each you ask, is this the way? But the way cannot be found without knowing the cargo, and the cargo cannot be known without recognizing there is a way. And it is simply this: you have gifts. The world needs your gifts. You must deliver them. The world may not know it is starving, but the hungry know, and they will find you when you discover your cargo and start to give it away. Yeah. So find your gifts. Yes.
Beautiful. And you have modeled that so well. We are being fed by you and your work. So I want to deep bow to you and thanks. Let's stay in conversation and keep the conversations and circles happening. And so good to be with all of you that were on the Zoom. It felt like the old tribe coming back together again around your work. So thanks, Doug.
Thank you,
to
Jud.
have everybody on there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye, you all. Yeah.
Thank you all. Peace. Thanks
Thank
for
you,
being
Doug.
on.
Thank you, Jud.
Thank you.